A major disaster declared in Hawaii. Wildfires kill 36 people and devastate the islands of Maui.
Explosions, we were hearing screams out of a horror movie. Yeah. You know, we didn't know, we were hearing people throwing up, we didn't know where they were, the smoke was just keep getting all black.
In Northern Ireland, an apology from the police chief and an admission dissidents may have names and addresses of thousands of officers.
They are officially astronauts. Welcome to space.
Woo. Completely surreal, an 80-year-old's account of his journey to the very edge of space. Here, dozens of migrants are brought safely to shore. More than 100,000 of them may have crossed the channel since 2018. A plane makes an emergency landing on a road in Gloucestershire, causing chaos for commuters.
Harry Kane looking for his 30th Premier League goal of the season.
Will he stay or will he go? The dilemma facing England captain Harry Kane. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview. That's from past. Evening all. It's like a bomb went off. One account of the devastation wrought on the Hawaiian island of Maui after raging wildfires killed 36 people. Another survivor who had to rush into the ocean to escape the flames described it as a scene from a horror movie. President Biden has tonight declared a major disaster in the state, which is 2,000 miles off the west coast of the United States. Well, the fires, which began on Tuesday in the middle of tourist season, were fanned by Hurricane Dora, which moved south of the islands. Flames were worse, though, on Maui, home to over 150,000 people. By Wednesday, there were 4 large fires and thousands of tourists were evacuated from their hotels. The former capital, Lahaina, is almost completely razed to the ground. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner is in Maui tonight. Martha.
Hi, Neil. I'm at one of the evacuation centres in Maui. There are a few of them, and hundreds of people have been coming here throughout the day to receive assistance, shelter, food and water, many of them completely traumatised by what they've seen over the past few days. Parts of this island have been obliterated. Dozens have died. Authorities warning that death toll could well rise. There are parts of this island that emergency services haven't been able to reach yet. So people here traumatised, looking for loved ones who are lost. They're also mourning the loss of their homes and businesses. I spoke to some of the survivors. For those who live here, Lahaina is a treasure trove of memories for tourists and island escape. It is a paradise which became a death trap as flames fanned by a hurricane hundreds of miles away ripped through these streets. Old wooden buildings were turned to rubble in a matter of minutes. Many were caught unaware. 36 people died here in their homes and cars. Emergency services unable to reach them. Some were trapped here at the harbour between the fast-moving flames on one side and the ocean on the other. Among them, neighbours Idris and Damon, who jumped into the water to escape.
We keep hearing explosions, we were hearing screams out of a horror movie. Yeah. You know, we didn't know, we were hearing people throwing up, we didn't know where they were, the smoke was just keep getting all black, and then, you know, I called the cops again, they couldn't come. The third time I called them, they said, you have to go in the water. And I said, you want us to jump in the hurricane? It's black, you know. The ocean was pulling us at the same time. We were trying to have debris falling on us. We're trying to get wet and not burn.
How long were you in the water for before you were rescued?
Like 3 hours, maybe, something like that.
About 3.
Yeah.
It sounds miraculous that you were able to survive.
I didn't think so. I just prayed and I said, God, please not today. I didn't know what to say. This is it. You know,
I did the same thing. I was like, when I was on my back in the water going, I was like, not today, God. Not, just not today, not like this.
As the fires continue to smoulder, thousands of people are being evacuated from the worst hit parts of the island. Many are being brought here to a local high school turned into a disaster relief centre. Candy escaped the fires on an old moped, but her hometown was destroyed.
And I don't cry, but I haven't had much sleep in the last 2 days. And all I want to do is help people. I'm just so grateful to be alive so I can continue to help people.
Do you feel like you weren't prepared for this?
Nobody thought it was going to be like this.
Christina was staying in Lahaina with her family, but their hotel was evacuated. They've spent the past 2 nights at this shelter.
The Red Cross is here. The people are so kind. You know, we have food, we have water, and a place to shower, and people who love us.
You must feel lucky.
We feel very lucky, very blessed.
Oh my God,
Power has still not been restored in parts of Maui, and certain areas haven't yet been reached by search and rescue teams. This has been declared a disaster zone, but those affected say they need more help, and quickly. This is the worst wildfire to hit the US in 5 years since fires in Paradise and in California killed 85 people. The death toll could still rise, authorities saying that search and rescue remains their primary objective. President Biden also declaring Maui a disaster zone, offering his condolences to the people of Hawaii. He said anyone who has lost a loved one and whose home has been destroyed will get help immediately. For the minute, there's only one road into Lahaina, which is the worst affected area, so we're yet to see with our own eyes the sense of devastation. But hearing from people here, it's very clear that it's an almost apocalyptic scene there.
Martha, thank you. The head of Northern Ireland's police force cut short his holiday today to admit that sensitive information about 10,000 police officers may now be in the hands of dissident Republicans. Simon Byrne said he was deeply sorry for the data breach and that his officers were anxious, frustrated and really, really angry. This evening, the wife of one officer told Sky News her worst fears had been confirmed, as our senior Ireland correspondent David Blevins reports.
He's a man under pressure. The Chief Constable brought alarming news to the policing board. Terrorists exploiting the data breach to threaten officers and staff.
An early worst-case scenario that we have been dealing with is that third parties would attempt to get this data to intimidate, corrupt or indeed cause harm to our officers and staff. We are now aware that dissident Republicans claim to be in possession of some of this information circulating on WhatsApp.
The wife of a police officer told me it was her worst fear. We're not identifying her for obvious reasons.
To be honest, hearing that the information may be in the hands of terrorists, it's really, really concerning. It takes the element of fear and anxiety to a whole new level.
Do you and your family accept the apology from the Chief Constable?
Being completely honest, not really. Mr. Byrne did say today that no one at this stage has been moved to a new home or to a new location or been redeployed, but that doesn't mean that it won't happen in the very near future.
Dissident Republicans still pursuing Irish unity by violent means have killed 2 police officers. 300 were murdered during the Troubles. The attempted murder of another one this year saw the terror threat raised to severe, meaning attacks are highly likely. Terrorists claim to have accessed the names of 10,000 officers and staff. That's a major concern for the policing board.
If they do have it, that's incredibly serious. And I just wonder whether the police have the capacity in real and urgent time to do 10,000 individual risk assessments.
This is horrendous for police officers and staff, but for the families. And I've threats in the past myself, and I know that it affects the families more. So the families are very worried about all of that, and they need to have the support that is necessary for that.
And while senior officers assess who's most at risk, all police families can do is wait. David Blevins, Sky News in Belfast.
They journeyed to the very edge of space, the first tourists on board a Virgin Galactic spacecraft. The somewhat unlikely trio included a mother and daughter who won the trip in a competition and an 80-year-old British Olympian with Parkinson's who said the flight had exceeded his wildest dreams. Here's our science correspondent, Thomas Moore.
For the newest space tourists, this was to be the ride of their lives.
Release, release, release.
Launched from the Virgin Galactic mothership 8 miles above the New Mexico desert, they streaked away in their spaceplane, reaching 2,500 miles an hour.
That's incredible. I can imagine they're having quite a great time.
Just a minute later, the engine cut out and they were weightless, floating 55 miles above the Earth.
And they are officially astronauts. Welcome to space.
British Olympian John Goodwin bought his ticket 18 years ago for a little under £200,000. Just the second person with Parkinson's disease to go to space. He said it was well worth the money.
The most impressive thing was looking at Earth from space. Just the pure clarity, was very moving.
Oh my gosh.
Quite surreal. And but without a doubt, the most exciting day of my life.
Also on board were a mum and daughter from Antigua, winners of a prize draw that aims to open up space to those who aren't super rich. It will change their lives.
We have to go beyond our fears. We have so much big dreams. A lot of times we're afraid to even voice it because it's too big and we don't want to be shut down by our dreams. But it is okay to dream big.
And last-minute nerves? You bet.
Actually, last night, I was getting second thoughts a little bit. It was like, oh my God, I'm doing this. What am I doing? But this morning I woke up and I sat up in bed and I was like, I'm ready. Like, I just felt it in myself that there was nothing else that I wanted to do but this right now.
For Virgin Galactic, success of their first flight of space tourists will be a relief. They had been grounded after problems in an earlier mission. Now they can work their way through the 800 people already on the waiting list for an experience that is, quite literally, out of this world. Thomas Moore, Sky News.
The number of people who have crossed the Channel in small boats in the past 5 years is now likely to have passed 100,000. Indeed, dozens of migrants arrived today as people smugglers took advantage of clear skies and calmer seas after days of rain and high winds. Our political correspondent, Maria Rora, is outside the Home Office. Maria, a significant milestone likely passed today.
Exactly, Neil, and that's the real issue, is actually the number necessarily isn't shocking, but it's a symbolic number. It's 100,000. It's a symbolic number of, really, it's epitomising government failure. And that's really what we saw this week from Lee Anderson. That's what he was really getting at when he was talking about his own government failing when it comes to immigration policy. Now, the fact that we don't know for sure yet, but it's very, very likely it's going to be at least 100,000 when we get those figures tomorrow, that is really not going to be welcome reading for Rishi Sunak on his holidays. This week is Small Boats Week. This is the week where the government wanted to shout on the rooftops of all the different policies and strategies they are using in their arsenal to try and reduce small boats crossings. And now we have a situation where we've got record numbers and that 100,000 number, that milestone figure. So realistically, it's painful for the government, it's painful for Rishi Sunak, it's very painful for the people in this building right behind me in the Home Office as well. But also Rishi Sunak has been very, very clear he wants to be judged on his record, judged on delivery. And at the moment, these numbers are going in absolutely the opposite direction to the government rhetoric.
Mary, thank you. A light aircraft made an emergency landing this evening on a busy road near Gloucester. The aircraft was forced to land on the A40 between Gloucester and Cheltenham. The road was then shut in both directions. However, it is understood no one was injured and no other vehicles were involved. West African leaders have chosen to activate a standby force to restore democracy in Niger after last month's coup. Western officials say the military junta has now threatened to kill the deposed president if neighbouring countries take military action. Ecuador has declared a state of emergency after a gunman shot and killed presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio at a political rally. The former journalist had been outspoken about alleged links between organised crime and politics. 6 people have been arrested. Junior doctors in England will walk out again tomorrow after new data showed that waiting times for elective surgeries have risen again to a new record high. The waiting list for electives in England increased to 7.6 million by the end of June. Of those, over 380,000 had been waiting more than a year. Almost 835,000 operations and appointments have been cancelled since health workers started striking in December last year, with one chief executive telling Sky News his hospital couldn't significantly reduce the backlog unless the pay dispute was settled. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi reports.
And I'll be taking your observations, is that okay?
All right, yeah.
Nigel Gregson says he's lucky. The cancer in his kidney was found by chance when he was working abroad and he needed his gallbladder removed. And after coming back to England for treatment, his surgery has only been cancelled once.
My heart dropped, yeah, it was devastating. I thought, I wonder how long I'm going to have to wait now, particularly with the industrial action taking place. So I was very lucky, really. There was a cancellation and I got in.
The waiting list for elective surgery is now longer than ever, at 7.6 million. And that can be demoralising for those trying to get on top of it.
It's very disheartening. Over the last year plus, we haven't really been able to make any inroads into our elective waiting list as such. There are lots of contributing factors, I think the patients that we face who need urgent surgery is growing.
During strike days, hospitals like this must prioritise emergencies over planned care.
The elective waiting list is the biggest casualty during any industrial action, with tens of thousands of routine operations and procedures being cancelled or delayed. But that's not the only disruption. It's August now, and this hospital should be getting ready for what will be another extremely busy winter.
And it is possible that these strikes will continue way past summer.
This is a time when we know that waiting lists were at the biggest level anyway, as we've come out of the pandemic. Continuously driving to bring those waiting times down, but actually this is having a big effect on how quickly we can bring those waiting lists down. So every time there's a strike, we're cancelling more operations because we can't utilise our theatres and our outpatient clinics, so the waiting lists don't go down as fast as we want them to.
Hi Nigel, I'll give you some water.
Thank you.
Nigel knows he's fortunate to have been seen so quickly, because many thousands of waiting patients won't be. Ashish Joshi, Sky News at Coventry Hospital.
It was once Britain's wonkiest pub. That is, until it was sold to developers, then destroyed in a fire, now being treated as arson, and the site bulldozed the following day. Those who drank and worked at the Crooked House in Henley are joining the region's mayor to demand it be rebuilt brick by brick, as Becky Johnson reports.
It's a simple demand from people who can't understand why anyone would do this to such an iconic pub. Known for being the wonkiest pub in Britain, the Crooked House had stood here in Himley near Dudley for 260 years. Now this is all that's left.
Angry, really angry. Yeah. They've took away something that means a lot to people.
It's a shame, it really is. It's upsetting, it's sad. We've had many happier time here, actually.
Well, my father passed away like 2 years ago, and I can remember him bringing me down here when I was younger, so obviously I've just seen it like this, and it's just heartbreaking.
Its famous sloping structure was the result of subsidence caused by nearby mining. It was well known for this trick, marbles appearing to roll up the bar. The pub was sold by Marston's at the end of July. Then on Saturday, a fire engulfed the building. Police are now treating it as arson. Mounds of earth blocked the road, meaning firefighters struggled to reach it. Then on Monday, it was demolished in what could be a breach of the law. The most recent landlord says someone must be held accountable.
It's just bewildering me why anybody would want to do that to anywhere, let alone a building that's so iconic and so well known worldwide.
The new owners of the pub are lettings and real estate firm ATE Farms, who also own land adjacent to the site. The director is listed as Carly Taylor. When we visited the registered address in Leicestershire, there was no reply. Back in Himley, locals are calling for the pub to be rebuilt, a campaign backed by Amanda, who worked in the kitchen here for 10 years.
We'd like it to be rebuilt, and somebody needs to pay for what they've done. Somebody needs to be accountable for it.
And when you say rebuilt, brick by brick?
Yes, if it can be, yes.
If this was done deliberately and whoever was behind it thought they'd get away with it, they didn't reckon on the anger of local people who aren't going to let this go. Investigations will continue into who did this and why. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Staffordshire.
Tottenham and England captain Harry Kane is deciding tonight whether he will stay at the club where he spent almost his entire career, or up sticks and move to Germany. Spurs and German champions Bayern Munich have reportedly reached an agreement for a deal worth more than £100 million. Now it's down to the striker to decide, as Rachel Venables reports.
Whenever his team has needed him, Harry Kane has stepped up.
The brilliance of Harry Kane comes to the fore once more. Where would Tottenham be without the goals of their captain?
He's been with this club since he was a child. Now their captain and all-time top goal scorer, Harry Kane is a living Spurs legend. But with just a year to go on his contract, today Tottenham agreed a deal worth up to £100 million to send their star striker to Bayern Munich.
I don't want him to go. He is the greatest player of his generation, arguably the best striker in the world, and the greatest player to put on our famous white shirt, and I want him in it as long as possible. And let's get it right, winning trophies with Bayern, they win trophies every year, won't put him down in the history books, whereas staying in the Premier League and becoming the all-time leading goal scorer will.
Harry Kane now has a very big decision to make, while the fans will just have to wait and see what happens. They've known for a while that they might soon face a future without their top goal scorer. Tottenham's first game of the new season is on Sunday, and no one knows if Kane will still be in the squad. Tottenham want Kane to stay, but to make the best of a bad situation, they'd prefer to sell him now for millions, rather than letting him go for free when his contract's up next year. Reports suggest the England captain is leaning towards staying in North London for now, especially as he's just 47 goals shy of Alan Shearer's all-time Premier League record.
I think for Harry, the benefit of staying in England potentially next year, and he can have the pick of the clubs, because reality is all 19 other clubs would take him. It means that he can go on and potentially win trophies here, but also go on to break the Premier League record, which no doubt he will do.
As he faces the decision to stay or go, Kane knows that extra time at Tottenham would at least give him a chance to chase history at home. Rachel Venables, Sky News, Tottenham.
It's a familiar sight on high streets across the country, but possibly not for much longer. Today, the retailer Wilko collapsed into administration after failing to secure a rescue deal. More than 12,000 jobs are now at risk. Our business correspondent Paul Kelso takes up the story.
Wilko has been in business for more than 90 years, but now the discount retailer that caters to the cost-conscious has been squeezed into administration itself, leaving 12,500 workers on the brink.
A throw or plants or cat food, anything. It's just a fabulous shop.
All these people, see the same people in here. What are they going to do? What jobs are they going to find now? So it's going to be tough for them.
It's really convenient for me and really handy, and the fact you can take your dog in.
Being pet-friendly wasn't enough to protect Wilko from rising costs and falling revenue. Its third chief executive in as many years telling staff, "We left no stone unturned when it came to preserving this incredible business, but must concede that, with regret, we've no choice but to take the difficult decision to enter administration." Wilko has borrowed tens of millions of pounds and sold assets to try and manage a debt burden that left it vulnerable to declining trade and has ultimately caused its collapse. Administrators say that for now, these 400 sites will continue to trade and 12,500 staff will get paid as normal while they try and find a buyer. The family-owned business paid a £3 million dividend to its shareholders last year, despite a £36 million loss, leaving unions blaming management.
A lot of our members have worked for this company for years, if not decades. They've given their life to it. It's where their friends work. And quite frankly, they're absolutely devastated. I think for us as a union, we're both devastated and angry. This was completely avoidable. This is a result of bad decisions being made. And as a result, a perfectly viable business is on the brink.
The cost of living crisis might have been an opportunity, but while discount competitors like B&M thrived, a former store manager who left last week said Wilko struggled.
Certainly in the last 6 months, it's got very frustrating for customers coming in for the regular basic products that they would be expecting us to have on our shelves, and we were just not getting them in. We knew they had cash flow issues and supply issues, lots of other external factors that were often being blamed, but I think we all knew they had supply and cash issues.
The latest search for a buyer begins with a warning. Should it fail, every Wilko shop and every job is in danger. Paul Kelso, Sky News.
England forward Lauren James could still play in the Women's World Cup after being banned for 2 matches for her red card against Nigeria. It means she will feature if England make it all the way to the final. But if England win, they will be making 10 times less than Argentina's men's team received when they lifted their trophy back in 2022. Sky Sports correspondent Rob Harris reports from Sydney.
Everything that you can think about, 1 million are there, come on, more to follow.
FIFA's president celebrating his growing online following. More cash is what's wanted by players from FIFA. And more opportunities to flourish, which players know comes from investing in better pitches, preparation and pay.
That's just part and parcel of the game. The more the game grows and becomes a bigger, wider spread for the female game, that we deserve to be paid at least a reasonable amount for that. I don't think it's unacceptable to be asking for such thing.
Payouts for players for the first time, but a vast financial gulf remains. The total prize money from FIFA for Women's World Cup teams is £86 million. For the men's tournament last year, the pot was £344 million. FIFA will pay £3.4 million to the country that wins the Women's World Cup. But Argentina banked £34 million for winning in Qatar in December. For the first time at the Women's World Cup, though, every player should receive cash via FIFA, from £23,000 for those knocked out early to £210,000 for each of the champions.
FIFA has put pressure on sponsors and broadcasters to put more money into the Women's World Cup to achieve prize money parity. But with cash reserves of more than £3 billion, the disparities seem glaring, and they've been called out by Australia's World Cup squad.
FIFA will still only offer women 1/4 as much prize money as men for the same achievement.
Using this spotlight for activism is embraced by one of the World Cup organisers.
What we've seen is that conversation in Australia has really triggered, I think, a global conversation. We're seeing other countries around the world either pay their players equally or at least have the conversation about doing so. We're seeing that obviously at FIFA as well.
Turning that aspiration into a reality is a priority for UN Women, who partnered with FIFA to champion gender equality at the World Cup.
We've heard that by the next Women's World Cup in 2027 that at least the prize money will be equalized with the Men's World Cup. So let's see. We'll be holding them to account to make sure that happens.
The fight for pay parity continues, while many players fight to be paid what they're owed. Rob Harris, Sky News, Sydney.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll be taking a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined in the studio by the journalist and author Ian Dunt and The Spectator's political editor Katie Balls. We'll be discussing plenty of news, including this one on the front of the Belfast Telegraph. Here you see there, of course, after that data breach, it's quoting the Chief Constable of PSNI, Simon Byrne, insisting, "I am not going to quit. This is my responsibility." We'll see about that and discuss it after this.
5 of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, our first look at the front pages as they arrive. But first, a quick reminder as to our top stories. And a major disaster has been declared on Hawaii after at least 36 people died in wildfires on the island of Maui. Dissident Republicans claim to be in possession of personal information about police officers in Northern Ireland, information that was leaked in a data breach. And the number of people who've crossed the channel in small boats in the past 5 years is now likely to have passed 100,000. That's after dozens of migrants were safely brought to shore today. Quick glance at the clock means you're watching the press preview, our first look at the front pages as they arrive. Time to see what is making the headlines and the inside pages with the journalist and author Ian Dunt and the Spectator's political editor Katie Bowles. We get our money's worth from them. They will be with us from now until just before midnight. With you guys in just a second, but let's run you through the front pages, beginning with the Belfast Telegraph. It, of course, is covering the massive data breach and quotes the Chief Constable of the PSNI, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, Simon Byrne. He is insisting, "I am not going to quit. This is my responsibility." Here's the Express. It leads with an exclusive saying that ministers are warning of a surge in small boat arrivals across the Channel in coming months. While the number of migrants reaching British shores across the Channel in small boats has hit 100,000 since 2018. That is on the front of the Times. Now, in light of Wilko going into administration, the Metro has the headline, "High Street Hammered." Here's the Eye. It flags the start of a mortgage rates war, reporting that 13 lenders have cut prices, but let's not forget, millions still facing hikes after base rate rises. Striking doctors are just, quotes, harming patients, the Daily Mail reports, and the Health Secretary's demands that doctors stop their strikes. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, will go down in history for failing the climate. That's according to Greenpeace, and it's the exclusive on the front of The Guardian. In his hands. See what they did there. The headline on the front of The Sun, it's reporting on Tottenham star Harry Kane's transfer saga. Will he be off to the German club Bayern Munich? I'm sure we will find out shortly. And the Daily Star reports that Brits are swapping traditional holiday destinations for Belgium to beat the global warming crisis. Its headline, Costa del Dol. That's a bit harsh. A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll be seeing on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages whilst watching us discuss them. Technology is remarkable these days. We're joined tonight by Ian Dunt and Katie Bowles. Lovely to see you, and not in two dimensions for once. Actually, in real thing, I'll give you a little squeeze later on just to make sure that you are actually here. But let's start, shall we, Katie, with the front of the Eye. The mortgage rates war begins. Explain.
Yeah, so this is ultimately about the fact that we keep talking about when you're going to get the peak rates on mortgages, but actually major lenders cutting mortgage rates and the competition increasing. So Halifax, NatWest, latest to reveal price reductions when it comes to 5-year deals. Now, it's still going to be a nasty shock for lots of people who are coming to the end of their fixed-term mortgages. So I don't think we should misread this or misinterpret this as, things are getting much better. But if you think back, I think, to, just even a few weeks ago when mortgage rates were going higher than after the mini-budget and all these things, it could be that we're now, at the peak, things are coming down, there's more competition. That is good news, even if it is something which is, it might be a little bit less, it's still going to be painful, but it might be in the right direction of travel at least.
Ian, what are you thinking? I mean, to be fair, look, any kind of competition that's forcing kind of rates downwards in the mortgage market is going to be welcome. But as Katie's saying, like, we're all still paying a lot more than we used to.
Yeah, and look, in Downing Street, there'll obviously be this sense of, like, maybe there's a slight improvement in the situation, maybe this will reduce the degree of punishment that we'll get in an election next year. And the timelines don't work for that. Politically, they've never really worked. The time lag on inflation on all of these decisions is just too slow. I'd say the same goes for NHS waiting times, for instance. Even if Sunak can sit there and go, I've actually managed to hit one of my pledges, it won't feel that way to most people. Nevertheless, if you're taking out a mortgage now, there's this kind of ferocious pressure that's put on you of make the decision right now, 2-year, 5-year, whatever else. Because if you don't, next week, the week after, this rate could be getting worse. And this is a decision, like, if you think about what that's like for people, that's a decision that counts for the next, 30 years of your life. And you're put under this extraordinary pressure. So just the fact that that's starting to alleviate a little bit will still be very good news for a lot of people.
Ian, why don't you take us to the front of the Belfast Telegraph, the very latest on what has been happening over there. I think everyone accepts that this is an almost inexcusable data breach, that there is security concerns. We've spoken to one wife of one serving officer over there. They're checking under their cars like they used to back in the bad old days. But the police chief is suggesting that he's going to remain in post and sort it all out.
Yeah, I mean, his argument is the classic argument that you always hear of, like, I have to take responsibility for this, I'm going to take responsibility for fixing it. I mean, we now know that they're dealing with 2 security breaches. Yeah. So one of them, as far as we can tell, involves a laptop in a car. The initial one, reported earlier this week, was about an FOI request where seemingly the entirety of an Excel document was put up online for about 2 hours. So we're dealing with thousands of names here, and we're dealing with people who will, in many cases, have not even really told their families, or certainly not told their friends, that they were part of the police force. So it's a very, very acute situation that they're dealing with at the moment.
I mean, just in terms of the fact that this emerged from an FOI, I mean, it often happens. You put in an FOI request, the information goes up on the website, and you just hope, you absolutely hope that no one else has managed to see it published publicly on the website before you manage to get your story out there. This is of a different order, though, and I'm still struggling to work out how this information could have accidentally been attached to an FOI, because the first thing they do is go through with a black pen and wipe out all the bits that they don't want you to see.
It's very rare, we were saying this before we came on, as a journalist, to get more than you would expect from an FOI. You're normally, as you say, seeing lots of redacted information, where in this case it seems to be the opposite scenario. So it's very strange. Now, they've called it a human error in terms of how much is put out there, so you do wonder that we need to have more details of it, speculation, whether it's just someone who didn't quite know what they were meant to be doing, or if it was just an error in which document was released. But it was up there for about 3 hours, 2-3 hours. And the fact you already have certain groups saying, claiming they have access to it, something that's not yet been verified, is clearly going to be causing great alarm for the people who are on that list.
That's the concerning aspect of this story, isn't it? That over the past, few months and indeed years, we have seen the violence creeping back into Northern Ireland and police officers specifically being targeted, haven't we? Yeah,
and it was only quite recently you had an off-duty detective who now has life-changing injuries, ultimately due to this type of violence. So I think there's very little comfort, and they are providing support I think support's available for all, but only a certain number are currently receiving it. But I think that's just not going to alleviate the worry, particularly until we get more details as to whether the claims they have information and whether those various paramilitary groups is true or not.
Let's go, shall we, to the front of The Guardian. Katie, take us away on this one. I mean, it is Greenpeace's view, of course, that the Prime Minister will go down in history for failing on the climate. But, Greenpeace and Rishi Sunak have had a bit of a complicated relationship of late.
Yes, I think it's a mild way of putting it. And ultimately this is the latest twist in this tussle between Greenpeace and Downing Street. Now, Greenpeace ultimately pulled a stunt on the Prime Minister's home, not Number 10, his private home in his constituency, where protesters went onto the building. And this, I think, is safe to say, appalled quite a lot of people, particularly in the Tory party. And as a result, ministers have stopped interacting with Greenpeace on many levels. Now, in this interview that The Guardian have done, figures in Greenpeace are talking almost of how surprised they are, ultimately suggesting that they don't think this matches the level of the stunt they did. They think this is an overreaction. And they make the point that, yes, they may have gone to the Prime Minister's personal residence, but they made sure he was on holiday before they did it. So therefore, it shouldn't receive this. I think if you are going to do something like this, which was clearly an attention-seeking stunt, there is going to be a reaction. Now, maybe they misunderstood it, or perhaps, if Greenpeace have already decided that the government's position is not one it can agree to, both sides are getting something from this in how this is playing out and the attention now for what Greenpeace is saying, which is effectively trashing the government's record on the environment.
What do you feel, Ian? Because I have to admit, Will McCallum from Greenpeace says in this piece, locking us out is a way of denying civil servants a way of engaging with a civil society group that is desperately trying to make sure they're equipped to go into negotiation with the UN, for example, on deep-sea mining or so on and so forth. But look, I mean, if Greenpeace were being genuinely that altruistic, what did they think the government would do after they decked out the Prime Minister's house in black cloth and sat on the roof? The fact he was not there, I wonder, it may well be neither here nor there.
I've got to say, it's quite hard to argue with that opinion. Like, you're going to play two different roles. Right? Like, one of them, when you're an organisation like this, is you want to be advising civil servants, you want to be advising government, and most importantly, if we're realistic about it, is you're usually advising the opposition.
Of course.
Because the opposition don't have access to a civil service. They really need guys like you to come talk to try and bounce ideas off to get data from. The other one is that you're a sort of agitprop, spectacular protest demonstration. It's quite hard to straddle that line, and I think they've got themselves in quite a funny position here. Is that
because, as the article points out, stunts like this have taken place before. Politicians' homes have been targeted in the past. I mean, is this of a piece with the kind of the increasing kind of public backlash against what we're seeing from Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion and the direct action that they've participated in?
See, I think there's a real difference here. I find the Just Stop Oil protests quite hard to accept because they, just in terms of like your communication strategy, right? You're aiming your protest against the public. Whether it's a sporting event or a road, you're basically saying, I'm aiming to make your life less convenient. If you go to the Prime Minister's house, that seems like a completely legitimate protest to me. It's the Prime Minister of Britain, he's making the decisions. The protest itself is fine, but you do have to recognise there are going to be consequences to that when you do it in terms of your ability to access civil service and ministers.
Yeah, and I also do think it's partly, currently, you have both parties in a way wanting to say, oh, we're not that green, we're a bit green though. But also it's the fact that if you think in recent years, threats towards MPs, personal safety, I do think it just adds to this climate where people are taking these quite seriously. And yes, they might not be there, but it does suggest that perhaps people can get to the Prime Minister's private residence if they really want to, which is quite worrying if you are, an MP or the Prime Minister.
It certainly is. Ian, take us to the front of the Metro. And actually, it's been quite interesting in the office today, just, doing a little bit of an experiment around, finding out who actually knows what Wilko is and whoever has stepped inside. I was genuinely gobsmacked by how many people had never been inside, because, it's a shop that I've used and I would have used again.
Because evidently you're better at DIY than I am, because
Oh, God, no, you've not been in my house.
I mean, I am terrible at DIY and gardening, so this is not a shop that I use very often. But you can tell by the strength of the emotional reaction. I mean, so one of the sort of things that was said on your bulletin earlier was someone comparing it to Woolworths, of basically saying, look, this is somewhere that I clearly have some long-term affinity with and some sort of sense of warmth towards. The number of jobs, of course, is the more profound problem.
Absolutely.
And there stands at 12,500 in jeopardy. That there is, it is perfectly possible that those jobs will remain. But for the time being, if you're one of them, this is going to be a very nervous couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think it's also, obviously it's really worrying if you're an employee, but I think there's also, when the Willis comments a touch of, you go back to concerns about high streets, supposed to be centres of the community, and lots of these brands closing down, a pattern, and what replaces it. And you had recently the government looking at relaxing rules, so it's easier to turn some of these shops into housing, which could be a good thing.
Could be fantastic.
But of course, also it means perhaps it's less of a community hub, which is what we traditionally saw high streets to say. So it feels, a bit of a change in what we probably perhaps are going to get from the high streets if these trends continue.
Guys, we will pause there for a second, because coming up after the break, we'll be discussing whether holidaying in Belgium is as rubbish as the Daily Star makes it sound. We'll discuss that next. Clue, it's not, I promise you. There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Niall Paterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to the press preview. Ian and Katie still here. And Ian, why don't you have a go on striking doctors? Apparently, according to the front of the Daily Mail, they are just harming patients. Who's that according to?
This is from the Health Secretary. And the Health Secretary is rather bound to say it, because on the subject of Rishi Sunak's various pledges, one of them was to reduce NHS waiting lists. And we've now found that since last month, there's another 100,000 people on these waiting lists. It's not a problem that is getting better. It is getting worse. And he is right to say that one of the reasons it's getting worse is because of the strikes. I mean, no one disagrees with that. The strikers don't disagree with that. The whole purpose of doing a strike is so that you actually, demonstrate your point by removing service. So no one disputes that point. The point is, whose fault is it that these talks have continued to go absolutely nowhere? How useful is it that Rishi Sunak says he simply will not go into any further negotiation?
Yeah, I mean, but even the government was even maintaining today that there were informal discussions taking place, which the BMRA turned around and said was absolute tosh.
I mean, look, it's been a terrible spectacle watching them do this over the course of a year. It has ended them up in this position. But the crucial strategic point is this. If Sunak comes out and says, I'm staking my reputation on an improvement in service in the NHS, then they have got his head in a lock, because they do have the power, as Barclay is saying here, to make life very, very difficult for him indeed.
Katie?
Yeah, I mean, I think the junior doctors obviously have a massive impact, and doctors more generally, when it comes to the waiting lists. But you are now seeing this new attack from the government, where I think they are much happier to just almost try and blame the strikers, as opposed to say we're in talks and all those things. And that's partly because there's been a slight divide and rule tactic. So if you look at the fact teachers, for example, recently voted to accept the pay offer, nurses, accepting pay offers, and you had the, it means I think it's a bit easier in government. They're always most worried about nurses in terms of where public sympathy was.
Of course.
And then also teachers, I think, is something where they thought, after lockdown, particularly having kids out of school, and therefore with the junior doctors particularly, there's often this attempt to say, well, the BMA are unreasonable, look at these, look at what they're doing when they're off. And I think you're seeing some of this in the comments now from the Health Secretary, and trying to win that fairness argument in the public, whereby, picking apart junior doctors as separate to the other ones. And now, will it work? I think ultimately, to Ian's point, if people cannot get a doctor's appointment, I think eventually the government gets blamed. But
well,
I think
we've got an excess of 7 million electives,
Exactly.
waiting that are overdue. Do you know what? Let's try and end on a slightly more positive note. A great run of front pages, I have to say, from the Star this week. This is perhaps not their best one, but they are suggesting, because the Costa is just a wee bit too warm these days, we're all off to Belgium on our holidays. Really? Come on.
And I felt that you were gearing up for a defence of Belgium.
I like the place. I like the place, and I like the people. I mean, the idea that it is dull compared to Benidorm is just beyond me. But at the same time, I can see why not many people would necessarily go straight there as their desired holiday destination.
I like the sun so much, I'm going on holiday to Scotland.
Get in, there we are.
But yeah, I mean, I recently spent 2 hours in Brussels on the way somewhere. It didn't make me think I was going to book a fortnight there, but you never know. I think I'll go a bit colder.
I mean, look, I say
you
this.
You said you couldn't find it. You didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, don't dub me in. And I say it as a sort of committed Remainer. Brussels is awful. I mean, as a destination, it's just dreadful. The beer is chronically overrated. The food is no good. It is unbelievably cold in a way that's not fully
Just
described.
go outside Brussels. But I have to say, Katie, where in Scotland are you heading to? Roughly.
Yeah, I'm going to the Highlands for a bit.
Wonderful. Absolutely.
As well as and stopping by the Fringe.
Yeah, I will say, just watch out for the midges in the Highlands. Yeah. We used to use them as torture devices on Sassenach. I don't think they do that anymore, though, I have to say. Ian, Katie, thank you both very much indeed. We will see you again in the 11 o'clock hour. Time for us, though, to have a quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, after the warmest day in a month, it will be a cooler end to the week with a mix of sunshine and showers. Friday, looking to start mainly dry. There will be a few showers around and some more general rain for northern Scotland. That rain will mostly clear through the morning, while showers develop more widely, but much of England will stay dry. There will be sunny spells too, but the far south can expect some low cloud, especially the Channel coasts. It will be cooler than today, although still warm, a high of 27 degrees possible in East Anglia. The afternoon brings further showers concentrated in the north and west, with longer spells of rain for parts of Ireland and Northern Ireland. The weekend will be unsettled again, the 5th weekend in a row, in fact. Saturday will bring plenty of showers, some heavy, prolonged and thundery, but southeast England looks mainly dry. It will be rather blustery, with temperatures returning to near average. As for Sunday, well, it's looking similar, but the wind will ease, so showers will become slow-moving.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Plenty more coming up next on Sky News at 11 o'clock. In fact, we'll have the latest as Joe Biden declares Hawaii a disaster area. 36 people so far killed in those wildfires.